brothers and sisters, as the time of our not being able to gather as a church is coming to an end for most of our congregation, I want to go back and revisit something that I spoke about early on during the COVID-19 lockdown, and that's God's sovereignty over COVID-19. If you remember, early on I spoke about how God is sovereign over every molecule, over every virus, and that God has a plan in that for everyone, for us as individuals, for us as individual families, for our church family, for our city, our province, our country, and for society around the world. And I remember just being really moved by the fact that as we talk about God's providence over all things, that there's something unique here in that God is using this one virus for myriad purposes in the lives that we have as individuals and the society at large and everything in between. And so I asked you back then to consider, what is it that God might be seeking to do in your life through this time? That we would all call this a trial. And understanding the fact that God does not allow trials into the lives of his children without very clear purposes. And so as we think about God's word, and a passage that you've heard me quote repeatedly in our church is Romans 8:28 and 29. For we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And in verse 29, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And so when we understand that all things, even COVID-19, works together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose, and that God's ultimate purpose is conformity to the image of Christ, that we were predestined not just for salvation, but for sanctification, and that God promised that he would use every situation, every circumstance, and even every trial, and even the trial of COVID-19 and some of the difficulties from various responses to COVID-19 to sanctify us, to make us more like Jesus. And I asked you at the beginning to consider and to ask the Lord to reveal what it is that he wants you to learn through this. Now, there were some key things that I've learned, and there's many more I'm sure that I'm not even aware of at this point. But what I'd like to encourage you to do is, now as we're coming to an end of this time, we're moving into a new phase, to ask yourself, what is it that you've learned about God? What is it that you have learned about yourself? What is it you've learned about human nature? What is it you've learned about sin and salvation? What is it you've learned about trusting God? And I trust that there's probably many things that you've learned, but consider that. Take the time and pray through that. Ask the Lord to reveal to you what it is that he has wanted you to learn. And look and think and even ask those who are closest to you. Ask them to tell you about ways that they've seen you change and grow and become more Christ-like through this. I'm going to touch on a couple of the things that I've learned over the next day or so. The next couple of days, I only have 2 left of these. But I would really encourage you to reflect and to seek the Lord, because you can guarantee that he had a purpose for you in this. And it was the purpose is your conformity to the image of Christ. And again, just to stop and to consider what specific ways has he done that? What ways has he caused you to grow through this trial?